The Galactic Council had long forgotten the name of Earth. To them, humanity was just a ghost, a civilization that had vanished centuries ago, wiped from existence by time itself. The history records spoke of their rise, their defiance against the greater empires, and their sudden disappearance. Some believed they were destroyed in secret wars, others thought they had perished in a self-inflicted disaster. But no one had seen a human, nor their ships, for over 500 years. That was why, when the distress signal was received from the edge of the dead sectors, it sent a ripple of fear through the council chambers. The signal was old, encoded in an archaic format, no longer used by modern species. At first, it was dismissed as a relic from a lost ship, a meaningless transmission from a long-dead vessel drifting in space. But then, a culinary scout fleet, sent to investigate, vanished without a trace. Their last message contained only 3 words before silence swallowed them whole. They are back. The words spread like wildfire through the political halls of the galaxy. No one wanted to believe it. The Ralzek, an old and proud warrior race, laughed at the idea. The Vurikol, masters of technology, called it a deception. But the elders of the Jakar, the oldest civilization in the council, remained silent, their faces grim. They remembered the wars. They remembered the warnings left behind when humanity disappeared. The message that had been ignored for centuries. If we ever return, it will not be in peace. A fleet was assembled immediately, not for war, but for answers. The Galactic Council did not fear humanity. They feared the unknown. If some remnant of that species had survived, they needed to know how. The fleet was led by Admiral Torvik, a seasoned warrior who had conquered more systems than he could count. He did not believe in ghosts. He believed in control, in power. And if humans had truly returned, they would learn their place beneath the Council's rule. As the fleet approached the coordinates, the stars themselves seemed to grow darker. The system was an empty void, a graveyard of forgotten worlds orbiting a dying star. Nothing should have been there, but something was. A massive structure loomed in the darkness, ancient and silent, floating in the void like a watchful predator. It was unlike any station the fleet had seen before, an enormous ring constructed from materials that didn't match any known database. It pulsed faintly, as if it had been waiting. Torvik ordered a scan, but the moment the ship's sensors locked onto the structure, every screen in his command bridge went black. The lights flickered, and an unfamiliar voice, cold, precise, and unmistakably human, echoed through the ship's speakers. "You should not have come." Panic spread through the fleet as systems began to fail. Ships lost control, drifting aimlessly in space. Weapons refused to fire. Engines shut down one by one, and the air itself grew heavy with an unseen force. Then, in the darkness, the true horror revealed itself. Emerging from the shadows beyond the station, sleek black ships appeared, their designs unlike anything in recorded history. Silent, featureless, watching. Torvik had seen countless warships in his time, but these were different. They moved with an unnatural grace, forming a perfect formation without a single signal exchanged between them. The Admiral felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. He ordered an emergency retreat. The fleet turned, engines struggling to respond, but before they could jump away, the first attack came. It wasn't a barrage of plasma fire, nor the impact of missiles. It was something worse. A wave of energy, invisible to the eye, swept through the fleet. Shields collapsed instantly, armor cracked without resistance, and one by one, the ships lost all power. No explosions, no screams of dying soldiers, just silence. Torvik gritted his teeth, watching as his fleet was rendered helpless within minutes. He activated a last resort distress beacon, knowing the Council needed to hear this. The transmission would reach them, even if he did not survive. But before he could send a message, the screens on his ship flickered back to life. A single image appeared, a face, human. Not the frail, primitive beings recorded in history, but something else. Sharper, stronger. Eyes that glowed with an eerie intelligence, as if they could see straight through him. The figure leaned forward, and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of centuries. "You forgot us," it said, "but we did not forget you." Then, without warning, the transmission cut. The last thing Admiral Torvex saw was the black ships moving toward them with terrifying speed. And then, the darkness took everything. The Galactic Council received the distress signal only minutes before it was abruptly cut off. The transmission was garbled, but the final words were clear. "They are back." Panic spread through the highest levels of power. Admiral Torvex's fleet was one of the strongest in the sector, yet it had gone silent. No wreckage, no survivors, no final battle reports. Just nothing. It was as if they had been erased. For centuries, humanity had been a mystery, a species that had risen fast, burned bright, and then disappeared without a trace. No one knew where they had gone, or why. The last known records spoke of a conflict with the Galactic Council, but no war had officially been declared. It was as if humanity had simply walked away from the stars. And now, without warning, they had returned. The Council convened an emergency meeting. Representatives of the major species filled the Grand Chamber, their voices overlapping in panicked discussions. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others insisted on diplomacy. But the elders of the Jakar, the oldest and most cautious race, said nothing. They only listened. High Chancellor Veros, leader of the council, silenced the chamber with a single command. He stood tall, his gaze sweeping across the assembled leaders. "We must not act blindly," he said. "We do not know what we are dealing with." A holoscreen activated behind him, displaying the last image transmitted from Torvex's fleet. The dark, featureless ships, the eerie structure, and then the face, human, watching, unblinking. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. "This is not the humanity we remember," Veros continued. "They have changed. They have grown. And they have made it clear, we are the intruders now." Across the galaxy, the message spread. Military fleets were put on high alert. Defense grids powered up. Every species prepared for the worst. But then, without warning, the first human ship appeared. It did not arrive through conventional means. There was no flash of light, no hyperspace disturbance. One moment, the space above the Council's core world was empty. The next, a vessel stood motionless in orbit. A towering monolith of black metal, sleek and perfect, unlike any design known to the galaxy. It emitted no energy signature. It carried no visible weapons. And yet, every sensor across the planet failed instantly. Every defense system flickered and died. It was as if the ship owned the space around it. Panic erupted across the planet. Fighters scrambled, warships repositioned, but nothing worked. Communications were hijacked, screens across the world displaying a single message. "You forced us to leave. You thought we were gone. Now we return." In the council chamber, alarms blared. Veros stood frozen, his eyes locked on the towering vessel in orbit. He had ruled for over a century. He had seen wars, rebellions, disasters. But this was something else. A final transmission played. It was not a demand, not a threat, just a simple statement. "This time, we do not come in peace." Then the black ship moved, and the stars themselves trembled. You said, across the galaxy, fear spread like wildfire. The return of humanity was no longer a rumor, no longer a ghost story whispered in dark corners of the Council's archives. It was real. The black ship above the core world had left without firing a single shot, yet the damage it had done was immeasurable. Every species in the Galactic Council had seen it. Every leader had felt the cold grip of helplessness as their most advanced technology failed before it. And then the disappearances began. Military outposts on the far edges of Council-controlled space went silent. No distress signals, no wreckage. Entire fleets sent to investigate simply vanished. The Council's elite forces, once considered unstoppable, were swallowed by the void one by one. It was as if the galaxy itself had turned against them. High Chancellor Veros had seen enough. "We cannot wait for them to strike first," he declared in a War Council meeting. "If we do not act now, there will be nothing left of us to defend." The Ralzek warlord, a towering beast of muscle and armored scales, slammed his fist onto the table. "We should have crushed them when we had the chance." His voice was a growl of fury. "Enough waiting. Let us show these ghosts the might of the Council." The Vuur-Kal Grand Technomaster, whose species prided themselves on their advanced weaponry, nodded in agreement. "They disabled our systems once, but they will not do so again. We have adjusted our defenses, reinforced our networks. We will not be caught unprepared a second time." The decision was made. A war fleet, one larger than any ever assembled, was dispatched to hunt down the humans. Thousands of warships, armed with the deadliest weapons the Council could muster, spread across the void, sweeping the silent regions where humanity had reappeared. They found nothing. Day after day, ships patrolled empty space, only to be met with silence. But then the attacks began. It started small. A single destroyer disappeared without a trace. Then a battleship. Then an entire squadron. The fleet commanders grew paranoid, splitting their forces to cover more ground. It didn't help. No distress signals, no debris, just ships vanishing into the darkness. Then one ship made it back, a shattered dreadnought, drifting into the nearest Council-controlled system, its hull torn apart as if by unseen hands. Rescue teams boarded it, hoping for survivors. They found none. But they found a message, burned into the ship's walls, written in deep, jagged scars. "You hunted us once. Now we hunt you." The galaxy held its breath. For the first time in centuries, the predators of the stars realized that they were now the prey. The silence that followed was worse than the attacks. The Galactic Council's war fleets, once symbols of dominance, had turned into fragile targets drifting through the void. No species had ever waged war like this, without open battles, without grand declarations. Humanity had returned, but they did not come as conquerors. They came as ghosts. High Chancellor Veros stood in the heart of the Council chambers, surrounded by leaders who had once ruled the stars with confidence. Now they whispered in hushed tones, their voices filled with something they had never known before. Fear. A grim-faced general stepped forward, his scales dark with unease. "We must recall our fleets. Every ship that remains in open space is vulnerable." The Ralzek warlord bared his fangs in frustration. "Cowardice will not save us. We must strike back." "Strike back at what?" The Grand Technomaster's voice was barely above a whisper. "Our sensors show nothing. Our weapons are useless against an enemy we cannot even see. We fire at shadows while they carve away our forces piece by piece." Veros clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm. The Council was unraveling. He needed to act, before panic turned into chaos. Then the lights flickered. The great chamber, built to withstand any attack, fell into darkness for only a moment. When the lights returned, the holographic displays around the room had changed. The star maps that once showed their empire now displayed something else. Coordinates. They spanned across Council space, marking each system where a fleet had vanished, each colony that had fallen silent. The pattern was unmistakable. The humans weren't attacking at random. They were encircling the core worlds. A message appeared on the central display, a simple, chilling sentence. "You made us disappear. Now, it is your turn." The room fell into stunned silence. Then the alarms blared. A dozen Council worlds reported the same thing. Black ships emerging from nothingness, surrounding planets without firing a single shot. Defense grids shut down before they could activate. The most advanced military installations were reduced to powerless husks in seconds. And then the broadcast began. Across every world, every screen, every device, a human face appeared. Not a commander, not a soldier, just a single, ordinary-looking human. Their expression was calm, their voice cold. For centuries, you erased us from the stars. You forced us into the shadows. You took our worlds, our people, our future. And you thought we were gone forever. The message changed. The face was replaced with images, ancient records of humanity's exile, the battles that had been erased from Council history, the betrayals that had been forgotten. The truth was no longer a secret. The galaxy watched in horror as the past was rewritten before their eyes. Then the voice returned. We have not come for peace. We have not come for war. We have come to remind you, humanity never forgets. The transmission ended, but the nightmare was only beginning. You said, panic spread like wildfire. Across the Galactic Council's core worlds, chaos erupted in the streets. Citizens flooded emergency shelters, fearing an attack that had not yet come. Entire governments collapsed under the weight of their own fear. The mighty council, which had ruled for centuries, now found itself powerless against an enemy that had yet to fire a single shot. High Chancellor Veros stood in the War Command Center, staring at the reports flooding in. The humans had surrounded dozens of key systems, yet not a single fleet had engaged them. No demands had been made, no ultimatums. They had simply arrived, and the Council's forces had crumbled without resistance. A frantic voice crackled through the communications network. This is Governor Rezak of Thalvos Prime. Our defense grids are offline. We can't. The transmission cut out. Another system lost. Another world silenced. The warlords and admirals gathered around the Chancellor, their faces tight with fear. We must act, one of them bellowed. Deploy ground forces. We cannot let them take our worlds without a fight. They haven't taken anything. The Grand Technomaster snapped. They haven't fired a single weapon, yet we are losing faster than if they had launched a full-scale invasion. This isn't war. This is something worse. Veros knew the truth. The humans weren't just defeating them. They were breaking them. He turned to his intelligence officers. What do we know about these ships? Where do they come from? One of them hesitated before speaking. Our analysts believe they are using technology far beyond anything in the known galaxy. Their ships move without detectable propulsion. Their systems are impenetrable. It's as if they control space itself. That is impossible, the Relzek warlord growled. No, the officer replied. We thought their disappearance meant they were gone. But what if they left to evolve beyond us? What if they spent centuries preparing for this moment? A sickening realization spread through the room. The Council had exiled humanity long ago, believing them weak, unworthy of the stars. But instead of fading into obscurity, they had become something more, something that no longer played by the rules of galactic war. Then, the central display flickered. Every transmission across Council space was replaced with a single image. A human figure stood in shadow, their features obscured. When they spoke, their voice echoed with quiet finality. You once cast us out. You forced us to wander in the void alone. Now we have returned, not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as the end of your rule. The room fell silent. The Council's leaders, once so confident in their dominance, could do nothing but watch as the shadows of their past came to claim them. You said, the weight of silence crushed the Galactic Council. For the first time in its long history, its leaders, once proud and unchallenged, had no answers. No battle plans, no strategies, no demands to send to their enemy. The war they had feared had never begun, and yet they were already losing. High Chancellor Veros gripped the edges of the war table, his claws digging into the metal. He had ruled for decades, leading the Council through conflicts, betrayals, and power struggles. But this was different. There was no enemy to strike, no fleet to counter. Humanity had not come as warriors, but as ghosts rewriting the fate of the stars. A panicked transmission broke the heavy silence. "This is Admiral Xavrin of the 12th Armada. We have encountered the human fleet at the edge of the Rithan system." Static. Then a new voice took over the channel. Cold, calm, human. "Your ships are nothing but relics. Your weapons, useless. Your war, over before it could begin." The connection severed. Another fleet lost. Another piece of the Council's once mighty empire swallowed by the silent storm. The Rulzek warlord slammed his fist against the table. "Enough. We cannot cower in the dark like frightened children. If we are to fall, let it be in battle." The Grand Technomaster shook his head, his luminous eyes filled with something rare. Defeat. Battle. Against what? Against ships that move unseen. Against weapons that require no fire to kill. We are not at war. We are being erased. A low hum filled the chamber as the central display flickered to life. Every council leader turned toward it, their bodies tense. The humans had sent another message, but this time it was not just a voice. It was a recording. The video showed a world long thought forgotten. A planet on the edge of known space, its surface scorched and broken, its cities turned to dust. Earth. For centuries, the Council had erased its name from records, ensuring that no one would remember the exile of humanity. But the humans had not forgotten. They had never forgotten. The recording changed, now displaying a fleet unlike any the Council had ever seen. Silent, black warships hovering over the ruins of their lost homeworld. And then the final image, one that sent a chill through every being watching. A single sentence, written in burning letters across the sky of Earth. "We were forsaken. Now we return to decide your fate." The message ended. The display went black. And the countdown began. Terror gripped the Galactic Council's core worlds. The countdown had begun, but no one knew what it led to. Every species in the Council watched, waiting for the storm to break. But the humans did nothing. They did not attack, did not demand surrender. They simply let fear do their work for them. High Chancellor Veros paced the war chamber, his mind racing. Every military plan had failed. Every fleet sent against the humans had vanished without a trace. Council space was shrinking by the hour, yet not a single human weapon had been fired. It was as if the very idea of war had been turned against them. "How long?" he asked, his voice low. An officer hesitated. 7 hours until the countdown ends." Veros clenched his jaw. 7 hours until what? Destruction, surrender, or something far worse. The Rulzek warlord growled, his claws tapping against his armor. "We should launch a final strike. Hit their fleet with everything we have left." The Grand Technomaster shook his head. "You do not understand. There is no fleet, not like we imagine. Their ships are not bound by space as we know it. They are beyond our reach, beyond our weapons. You could fire 1,000 cannons and hit nothing but air." A nervous silence followed. For the first time in history, the might of the Council meant nothing. Then, a whisper spread across the chamber. A single word. "Surrender." Veros turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. "Who said that?" No one answered, but the idea had already taken root. Surrender. It was unthinkable. And yet, what choice was left? The displays around the room flickered, and the human spoke again. "Your fleets are gone. Your systems abandoned. You hold power in name only. But we are not monsters. We do not seek to rule you. We only seek one thing: judgment." The room fell silent. Judgment. The word felt heavier than any weapon. The transmission continued. Asterisk, we will not burn your worlds. We will not enslave your people. But the Council faced the consequences of their choices. The message ended, but the weight of those final words pressed down on every being in the war chamber. The Galactic Council, once untouchable, now stood on the precipice of its own reckoning. High Chancellor Veros exhaled slowly. His mind raced through every possible scenario, every desperate maneuver that might delay the inevitable. But there was nothing. No fleet to rally, no allies to call upon, no miracle waiting in the dark. The humans had already won, not through war, not through force, but through sheer inevitability. The Grand Technomaster stepped forward, his usually unreadable face twisted with something close to awe. "They could have wiped us out the moment they returned," he murmured. "But they didn't. They are not conquerors. They are executioners, and they have already decided our fate." The Rulzek warlord snarled, his pride refusing to accept the truth. "Then let them come. I will meet them in battle." Veros turned to him, his voice like iron. "And be erased like the rest. No, this is beyond war. This is the collapse of an empire." A new transmission filled the chamber. Live footage. The humans had arrived. Their ships, dark and motionless, hung over the Council's last stronghold. They did not fire. They did not move. They only waited. A final message came through, and this time, it was not a warning. It was an offer. The Council will answer for its crimes. Surrender, and justice will be served. Resist, and the stars will forget you ever existed. A heavy silence stretched across the room. Then, slowly, Veros reached out and pressed a single button on the command console. The universal surrender code. Across the galaxy, alarms ceased. Defense grids powered down. What remained of the Council's military forces stood down. And humanity, after centuries in the dark, had finally returned to claim its place among the stars.